we both have talked, you and I both, in different shows, podcasts. We've talked about inversion a lot and how that's it seems to be a pattern that we see in dark spiritual forces to take things that are good. We see this with symbolism and invert it, right? If you think of the pentacle or the pentagram, that's a classic symbol of man. And then the inverted pentagram is like the inversion of man. It's like man pointing down, man die, man go down, right? So do you see that in the abuses of liturgy that seem to be really prominent in the last, say, 50 years in different traditions, and even in the Orthodox Church to a degree, and that maybe not as bad as the Roman Catholic and Protestant worlds, but do you see that inversion and an attack on the liturgy as something that is a demonic spirit, basically?
Oh yeah, I think that some of these have become so egregious that they're nothing less than just satanic. Like some of these are. And I mean, I'm not saying that the people who do them are Satanists or anything like that, but I think they're animated by a spirit of inversion. You know, one of the craziest examples, I don't know if you saw that they in England, they're losing their minds. They put up this like carnival slide in the nave. You saw this, right? Yeah. And the bishop like went up there, did his homily, and then slid down this slide. And I was thinking, like, could you get like it's like snakes and ladders, right? He's basically like going down the snake as he's in church, and it's a carnival. And I'm thinking, like, so I think that a lot of these have become so egregious that they're actually sometimes worth paying attention to kind of understand what the upside down looks like, because, you know, you could have had warnings of saints, you know, a few hundred years ago about the Antichrist or about, you know, what, you know, and it was vague, but now nothing of it is vague, because you can actually see, you know, things become, you know, like these clown masses that the Catholic Church, not all, I mean, that some weird Catholic churches are engaging in. And, you know, also just the desire to make everything as informal as possible in the liturgical space. That's also a kind of breakdown of meaning. It's just an image of this kind of breakdown. The disco masses. I mean, there's so many. There are so many that we could say. And obviously now the big one that's going to take up space and is already doing it in kind of liberal Episcopalian type churches is the celebration of the LGBT agenda as becoming, let's say, like for them, like an actual image of sanctity, like an image of what is holy. That inclusivity is the image of holiness itself, and that openness and inclusivity and variability is the very image of God. And so it ends up being really the upside down of what is true, which is that God is calling us towards transcending our idiosyncrasies and our divisions and our tribalism. Doesn't mean that those can't exist. That is right. We do exist in particulars, but that Christ is calling us to move into Him as much as possible and move beyond these idiosyncrasies. But now they're using this kind of weird inclusivity as an image of that. Like they think that inclusivity is an image, is kind of inclusivity without judgment. I don't know if have you seen the dancing frieze of saints? Have you ever seen this?
I'm not sure.
Oh man, you need to look at this. You have a blast. It's a church in California. It's an Episcopal. It's actually St. Gregory of Nyssa Church, which is sad. But they have a frieze of saints up in the middle of the church, and it's all these saints doing the can. They're all dancing. And there are legitimate saints in there. You know, let's say there's Augustine and there's St. Basil or whatever, but there's also, you know, like Ella Fitzgerald and Harvey Milk and like John Coltrane and Albert Einstein and so they're dancing, doing the can. And so you can really see this kind of just complete breakdown of hierarchy, this complete breakdown of meaning, you know, what it means to be a saint, what it means to be holy. You know, it just ends up, but it ends up looking upside down because they're actually celebrating them, right? They're actually putting them up in the church as images to look at, you know, while you're worshiping God. It's like, man.
I think it was a Methodist cathedral, and they literally had just installed a stained glass window that had the apostles riding around in a Corvette. And I was like, I'm not joking. I was like, what? What do you make of the weirdness? I mean, I get like the inversion in the sense of like the really satanic stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't understand the weirdness. Like,
The weirdness.
what's with
Yeah.
the apostles in a Corvette? I don't get that.
Yeah. Well, it really has to do with the end. It has to do with the end. I'm sorry to say. So if you kind of understand, you know, what we talked about, the idea that I talked about the medieval manuscript, you know, and how you have the image in the center, and then on the border you'll have the ornamentation, and then you also have idiosyncrasy and monstrosity. You'll have little monsters, little weird figures in the borders. And if you look at the first cycle, let's say in scripture, from the fall to the flood, you get that same image, right? You have this movement down the mountain, a mountain of paradise, moving out into the chaos. And then what happens is you have mixture, you have giants, you have monsters, basically. And so that's the weirdness. Weirdness is just a breakdown of meaning. And so it's a breakdown of hierarchy. It's coming to the edge of an identity, and now experimenting the idiosyncrasy of that identity. It's like, you know, you have the central image of the garden, and then at the edge of that you have the monster. Okay. Think of like the Pliny's map is like that, right? You have the omphalos in the middle, and then on the edge you have all these monsters racing.
Creatures.
Well, that's where we are. We're at the edge of the world with all the monsters coming out. And it's manifesting itself in all kinds, like something as silly as Sesame Street, where all these monsters are your friends. You know, this idea of monstrosity and you know, the idea of like How to Train Your Dragon, where ultimately the dragons end up being better than us, right? All of this imagery, it's in the zeitgeist, like it's in the air, because we are at the end of something, like we're reaching the end of something. And so because of that, you know, that's why the 70 genders and, you know, all this breakdown of identity into idiosyncrasy, that's the image. And so the weirdness is, it really is like this modern pulse, like this modern like a thrust to go against the meaning.
Yeah.
And to manifest idiosyncrasy because we think it's cool, because we think it's edgy, you know. Even think about that word, edgy. Like we're edgy.
Like over the edge into the abyss. Yeah.
That's right. And so I think that's what it is. And so that's why there's this celebration of weirdness as almost like a value in itself. And it has to do with the celebration of mixture, and it has to do with the celebration of idiosyncrasy. So
yeah, well, it makes me think of like like Hieronymus Bosch paintings, right? Where you've got these like, you know, weird creatures that are supposed to signify the demonic, you know, where it's like a fish head with like a man's body and like a giant butt, you know, coming out of his chest, literally like butt monsters walking around. And Bosch was doing that to, I think, make your point, right? To signify that the closer that you get to the abyss and to the realm of the demonic, it gets into the madness, right? The madness of the demonic and the chaos, and things don't make sense. You know, you've got talking butt creatures, to be frank. I mean,
hybridity is an image of the edge, right? That's what it is. Right. It's an image where, so that's why, like, if you look at the image of St. George killing the dragon, the traditional dragon in Orthodox iconography is always a hybrid. He's always, right? He's a lizard with bird wings and with mammal feet. And so he's a category that doesn't exist. He's a breakdown of categories, right? This experience of the strange, you know. And so that's what it is. Like when you experience something strange, when you experience something that you don't have a category for, it's going to present itself at first as a monster to you. We are in the world, like you said, like a great, and it's upside down and it's hybrid and it's inverted. You know those images? You probably watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right? You know that image of like the guys blowing trumpets out of their butts? Like that's an actual medieval image. They didn't make that up. Right. Like those exist in medieval manuscripts, and they represent that edge, that upside down, where instead of air coming out of your mouth and being meaningful, you have air coming from accidental air coming from behind, where it's uncontrolled and it's funny and it makes noise instead of meaning. And so it's like, and so that's where we are today. We have noise, accident, and hybridity and mixture and all of these images of the edge.
And I'm not saying that it's always wrong to listen to secular music or to enjoy, you know, absurdity and comedy and that kind of stuff. But I did eventually come to realize, no, he actually had a point that in those kinds of musical trends, even though we can to a degree, I think, appreciate them, there is the notion of the breakdown of meaning, and it is postmodern music, because most of those songs are actually intentionally absurd and meaningless.
Exactly. No, you're right. a good way to understand it traditionally, like you said, it's not that it's wrong in itself. It's all about place. It's all about things being in their proper place. So traditional societies always had their carnival, right? You know, we had Mardi Gras, we had meat fair. You know, the Jews have Purim, which is even straight out of the Bible, where you have a festival where meaning breaks down, right? At Purim, for example, the Jews dress up, they wear weird costumes, and it's said that they have to drink and turn on themselves until they fall down, right? So that's a great example, like getting drunk, losing meaning, everything kind of falling down. And so you see that, and in the West, for example, they had the Feast of Fools, which was around the New Year's, where they would, you know, elect someone to, like a child, to be a bishop, or they would have a mock king, and then everybody would kind of pretend that he's the king, and it would be this upside down. And so it was these festivals of inversion. And then it's like, it's that moment at the end of the world, at the end of the cycle, at the end of the year, where meaning breaks down, and then there's a resurrection, and then things kind of come back up. And so there has always been a little bit of room for that. Like if you think about, like in the Orthodox tradition, for example, the meat fair, the day before the carnival, that's what carnival means, right? Carnival means meat fair. Meat fair is on the same day as the Last Judgment. We celebrate the Last Judgment and meat fair on the same day, which has to do with this idea of the end, right? It's like the end, the breakdown of meaning, then the judgment, and then the world starts up again, you could say. And so that's the pattern of everything. So now you can understand it that we're basically in a nonstop carnival. Like our whole world is just a carnival that's been going on for like, since World War II, just been kind of increasing since World War II. It's like massive carnival. And it's getting insane. It's getting more and more insane and more apparent that it's a kind of a crazy carnival. And then it turns into like like those like horror carnivals. Like that's what it's becoming, right? This kind of imagery of the horror carnival where it all goes wrong, and then the kind of zombie clowns come out to devour us all. That's pretty much where we are.
I don't spend a whole lot of time in the notion of the prophetic or in the sense of the like when the saints have visions and this kind of stuff. I'm not saying there's not a place for it. It's just that we don't talk about that a lot here because it's very speculative. But one of the visions of the saints that did strike me as pretty prophetic over the years was the dream that St. John of Kronstadt had, where he saw this what sounds like a clown mask, and it's amazing because this is 1880s 90s when he had this vision. So far it was even before the socialists in Russia. It was before the liturgical revolution of Vatican II, and he talks about people dancing around the altar. It sounds like a liturgical dance, this kind of weird stuff. Have you ever looked at that kind of an analysis or
Well, I've never heard of that vision, so I'm pretty impressed by it. You said he saw like a clown mask, right?
Yeah, it literally. Some people will say the vision is just predicting like the Bolshevik or the socialist revolutions in Russia, but it actually sounds like it does kind of sound like, but it sounds like more than that. It sounds like, because he doesn't say that the enemies of the church like come into the church and they defile the church. He says the church adopts this liturgical dance clown, and he says they're painted like clowns, and they're doing a dance liturgy. That's amazing. It is amazing. That's pretty amazing. And so the best way that for me to kind of understand it, it's also like I'm always careful. Like I like to tell people like we're at the end of something. I'm not saying it's like the end of the world necessarily. I don't know. Right. Only God knows. But I think that we can recognize the end of patterns and what they look like. Like the edge of the world has an objective reality to it. It looks like something, and it looks like a breakdown of meaning. It looks all the things, the carnival, all the things we're talking about. And so you could see, like for example, like in Weimar, for example, that's what happened. Like Weimar was a version of that, moved into this kind of chaotic space, and then it went too far, and then it brought a beast. Let's say it brought about a beast. Let's say you could say something like the beast killed the whore, right? The whore was riding the beast. And then at some point, the beast kills the whore and the beast takes over. And so you can kind of see that like, you get a sense that that's what's going on now. Like, you get a sense that we're at the end of the carnival and the beast is coming to devour the whore. And we have these systems of control which are looming in our face. And this system of identification and control, which are kind of looming on us and look like this moment, which is described in Revelation as this flip between the moment of the whore and the beast. And so I think that these patterns
like I think these are the patterns of reality, and so I think they have little manifestations, and we can recognize them as they happen. And you don't have to say like, okay, the end is nigh, it's the end of the world, everything is like, you know, Christ is returning tomorrow. Like I don't know any of that, but I do know that I can recognize that moment. Let's say that moment where the beast is about to kill the whore. I can see it coming, and it's like it's coming very fast.